It was the summer of 2023, a sweltering Friday night in Austin, Texas. The city buzzed with life, the streets alive with a cacophony of laughter, distant car horns, and the occasional strum of a street musician's guitar. The cicadas hummed their timeless symphony outside my modest ranch-style home on the east side of town, where the air was thick with humidity and the faint scent of jasmine from my neighbor's garden. I was alone. My husband, Dave, had left 3 days earlier for a long-haul trucking job to the Canadian border. We've been married for 7 years, a life built on shared routines and unspoken compromises. Yet, as I sank into the living room couch with a glass of iced tea, there was a gnawing void I couldn't shake. Then came the knock. It was sharp, deliberate, almost rehearsed. I peered through the peephole, and there he was, Richard McAllister, Dave's boss. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked hair that screamed authority. He held a six-pack of Shiner Bock beer in one hand, the other casually resting on his belt buckle. His trademark grin, the one I'd seen countless times at company barbecues and holiday parties, lingered in the flickering porch light. "Evening, Lydia," he drawled, tipping his hat. "Dave mentioned he'd be gone for a while. Thought you might appreciate some company." I hesitated, gripping the edge of the door. Something about his presence felt intrusive, though not wholly unwelcome. "It's late, Richard," I said, my voice steady but thin. "You didn't have to do this." Come on," he said, holding up the beer. "It's Texas. Nobody drinks alone on a Friday night." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. We settled on the porch swing, the humid air clinging to our skin like a second layer. At first, it was casual. He told me stories about his trucking days, how he'd once driven through a tornado in Oklahoma, how he narrowly avoided a moose in Montana. I laughed despite myself, the weight of his charm undeniable. But as the bottles emptied, the conversation shifted. His hand lingered too long on the swing's chain. His gaze dipped below my neckline. "You know," he murmured, his voice dropping to a low rumble, "Dave's a good man, but I don't think he realizes just how lucky he is." I laughed it off, brushing my hair behind my ear. But something flickered in the air between us, a magnetic pull I couldn't define, let alone resist. His hand brushed mine as he reached for another beer, and I felt the room tilt. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Dave. He rarely called when he was on the road. The timing was so precise it felt like a cosmic intervention. My heart raced as I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my drink. "I need to take this," I stammered, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. "Hey, babe," Dave's voice crackled through the line. "Just wanted to check in. How's everything?" "Fine," I said, my voice clipped. "Just a quiet night." Good. "Listen, I wanted to—" His voice cut out, replaced by static. "Can't talk long. Storm near Amarillo? Just take care of yourself, okay?" I hung up and leaned against the wall, the weight of my choices bearing down on me. When I stepped back outside, Richard was standing, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "I should get going," he said, his grin now a shadow of itself. The night ended without incident, but his visits became more frequent in the days that followed. Each one blurred the line between casual and inappropriate until I no longer recognized where it had been drawn. Then came the breaking point. It was late Tuesday evening, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Richard showed up unannounced, his demeanor different, tense, almost desperate. He clutched a folder to his chest like it was a life raft. "Lydia, we need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the house. "What's going on?" I asked, following him into the living room. I screwed up," he confessed, pacing the room. "There's something I've been keeping from you, something about Dave." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the front door swung open, and there stood Dave, his face a storm of rage and confusion. His trip had been cut short due to mechanical issues, and he decided to surprise me. The scene he walked into was a tableau of suspicion. Me, standing in my nightgown, and his boss, disheveled and frantic. "What the hell is going on here?" Dave bellowed. "Dave, I began, But Richard cut me off. "It's not what it looks like," he said, holding up his hands. Dave lunged at him, and the two men collided in a blur of fists and shouts. As I tried to pull them apart, the folder Richard had been clutching spilled onto the floor. Photos, receipts, and handwritten notes scattered across the carpet. My eyes caught one detail that made my blood run cold. A picture of Dave and another woman. Her face unmistakable, her hand resting on his chest with an intimacy that was undeniable. "What is this?" I whispered, holding up the photo. Both men froze, their faces pale. "It's not what it looks like," Dave stammered, his voice barely audible. The weight of betrayal hung thick in the air. But whose betrayal was it? And how deep did it go? The room felt suffocating as I held the photograph in my trembling hands. The woman in the picture had sun-streaked blonde hair and a confident smirk, her manicured nails curling around Dave's arm as if she owned him. A wave of nausea hit me as I searched my husband's face for an explanation. "Who is she?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "It's not what it looks like," Dave repeated, his words hollow and robotic. His gaze darted between me and Richard, as if trying to decide who posed the greater threat. Richard, meanwhile, had regained his composure. He stepped back, smoothing his shirt as if this were just another business meeting gone awry. "Lydia, maybe we should sit down. There's more you need to know." "More?" My voice rose, shrill and disbelieving. What else could there possibly be? But before he could answer, Dave lunged at him again, slamming him against the wall. "You son of a bitch," he roared. "What are you even doing here?" "I'm trying to help your wife," Richard shot back, his voice steady despite the bruising grip on his collar. "God knows she deserves better than this." "Better than what?" I yelled, stepping between them. "Somebody better start explaining right now." Richard turned to me, his expression softening. "Lydia, I came here tonight because I couldn't keep this from you any longer. Dave's been lying to you, for months, maybe longer." Dave's face darkened, his hands balling into fists. "Don't you dare." "Don't I dare?" Richard sneered. "How about the affair you've been having with Brenda Carter? How about the trips to that little cabin in Wimberley while you're supposedly on the road?" The name hit me like a slap. Brenda Carter. A name I'd heard only in passing. A receptionist at Dave's trucking company, known for her saccharine smile and penchant for tight blouses. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The late nights, the inexplicable mileage on his truck, the whispered phone calls he dismissed as work emergencies. "Is it true?" I asked, barely able to hear my own voice over the pounding in my ears. Dave's silence was answer enough. "You bastard," I whispered, the anger rising like a tidal wave. "After everything we've been through, everything I've sacrificed, you do this to me?" He stepped toward me, his hands outstretched in a feeble attempt at damage control. "Lydia, I can explain. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I laughed bitterly, my hands trembling. I've heard that line before. Save it for someone who hasn't been blindsided tonight. Richard crossed his arms, watching the scene unfold like a director surveying his magnum opus. "Tell her the rest, Dave. Tell her about the money." Dave whipped around to face him. "Shut your mouth, McAllister." But it was too late. Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled receipt, waving it like a damning piece of evidence. $5,000 withdrawn from your joint savings account. Funny, though, Lydia didn't seem to know about it. "What?" My voice came out as a choked gasp. "What money?" Dave hesitated, his face flushing red. I needed it to help Brenda. She was going through some things." "Some things?" I repeated, the bile rising in my throat. "Are you seriously telling me you drained our savings for her? She needed it," Dave shouted, as if volume could justify his betrayal. "She was going to lose her house, her car, everything. I couldn't just let that happen." My vision blurred as I tried to process the magnitude of his betrayal. This wasn't just infidelity. This was an outright dismantling of our lives, brick by painstaking brick. Richard leaned against the wall, his expression a mix of satisfaction and pity. "You see, Lydia, this is why I came here tonight. You deserve to know the truth. And now that it's out in the open," he trailed off, his gaze lingering on Dave. It dawned on me then, the real reason Richard had come. This wasn't about me, or even about justice. It was about settling a score. "You're enjoying this," I said, turning to him. "You wanted to humiliate him." Richard didn't deny it. Dave's been taking shortcuts for years, both in business and in his personal life. It was only a matter of time before it all caught up to him. Dave laughed bitterly. "And you're so righteous, aren't you? Coming here like some white knight to save the damsel in distress. Let's not pretend this is about Lydia. You've been sniffing around her for months, waiting for your chance." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic fog. I looked at Richard, searching for a denial, but his silence spoke volumes. "Oh my God," I muttered, stepping back as the pieces began to fall into place. "You're no better than he is." "Lydia, it's not like that," Richard said, his voice suddenly softer. "I care about you. I just didn't know how to." "Don't," I snapped, cutting him off. "Don't act like this is some noble act. You're just as selfish and manipulative as he is." The tension in the room reached a breaking point as thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain began to patter against the windows, a welcome distraction from the chaos inside. I turned on my heel and stormed toward the door, desperate for air, for clarity, for anything but the suffocating reality of my life. "Lydia, wait." Dave called after me, but I didn't wait. I stepped out into the rain, letting it soak through my clothes as I walked down the driveway. My mind raced with questions. Where would I go? What would I do? How had my life unraveled so quickly? Before I could decide, a pair of headlights pierced through the darkness. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, the passenger window rolling down to reveal a face I hadn't expected to see. "Get in," the driver said, his voice low and urgent. "Here's the third and final part, where all the shocking twists and hidden intrigues come to light." The rain lashed against my face as I stood frozen on the driveway. The black car idled in front of me, its headlights casting long, eerie shadows across the drenched pavement. The driver leaned closer, revealing a familiar face, Brenda Carter. "Get in, Lydia," she said, her voice urgent but strangely composed. I stared at her, my pulse hammering in my ears. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I can explain everything," Brenda said, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "But not here. Please, just get in." Against every shred of reason, I slid into the car. The leather seat was cold against my skin, and the faint scent of lavender clung to the air, a sharp contrast to the chaos storming inside my mind. Brenda put the car into gear and sped off, leaving my house, and the two men still shouting inside, in the rearview mirror. "Start talking," I demanded, my voice edged with anger. "What's your game here, Brenda? What do you want?" Brenda's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "It's not what you think. Dave isn't the man you believe he is, or the man I thought he was." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I think I've got a pretty good idea." "No, you don't," she snapped, her voice trembling. "This isn't just about the affair. There's more. So much more." I stared at her, my anger giving way to unease. "What do you mean?" Brenda pulled into the parking lot of a dimly lit diner, cutting the engine. She turned to face me, her expression a mix of guilt and desperation. "Dave and we were together, yes, but it wasn't love. It wasn't even about us." "Then what was it about?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Money," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He roped me into a scheme, embezzling funds from the company." I blinked, trying to process her words. "What are you talking about?" "Richard's company," she continued. "Dave's been skimming money for years. Small amounts at first, just enough to go unnoticed. But then he got greedy. He needed someone on the inside to help him cover his tracks, and that's where I came in." My stomach churned. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because it's all falling apart," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Richard's onto him. That's why he's been showing up at your house, playing the hero. He wants to pin everything on Dave and on me. Good, I spat. You deserve it. Brenda flinched but didn't argue. You don't understand. Richard isn't innocent in all this. He knew about the embezzlement from the beginning. He let it happen because it gave him leverage over Dave and over me. My head spun as the pieces of the puzzle began to click into place. So you're saying Richard let Dave steal from him, just so he could, what? Blackmail you? Not just me, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You too. I froze. What? Brenda reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. This is why I came tonight. You need to see this. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs. My heart stopped. The images were of me and Richard. On the porch, in the living room, even a shot through the window of him brushing my hand. The angles were too precise, too calculated to be coincidence. He's been watching you, Brenda said, waiting for the right moment to use this against you. For what? I whispered, my voice hollow. To control you, she said simply. He's been orchestrating this whole thing, pushing you and Dave apart, setting himself up as your savior. He wants you, Lydia, and he'll stop at nothing to get you. I shoved the photos back into the envelope, my hands shaking. Why are you telling me this now? Why not go to the police? Because I'm scared, Brenda admitted. Richard's not just some sleazy boss. He's dangerous. He has connections, people who can make problems disappear. If I go down, he'll make sure I take the fall for everything. And if you don't play along, she trailed off, leaving the unspoken threat hanging in the air. The weight of her words settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I thought back to Richard's visits, his charm, his insistence on being there for me. It had all felt too perfect, too calculated. And now I knew why. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely audible. Brenda hesitated, then pulled out a small flash drive. This has everything. Bank records, emails, proof of the embezzlement. If we can get this to the right people, maybe we can stop him. Maybe. I echoed, my skepticism clear. It's a risk, she admitted, but it's the only chance we have. I stared at the flash drive, the weight of my choices bearing down on me. If I went along with Brenda's plan, I'd be taking on a man with the resources and connections to destroy me. But if I did nothing, Richard would continue to pull the strings, and Dave would walk away unscathed. What about Dave? I asked. Brenda's expression darkened. Dave's already a lost cause. He's in too deep. But you can still get out. The rain had eased to a soft drizzle as I sat in the car, the flash drive heavy in my palm. I thought about the life I'd built, the lies that had unraveled it, and the dangerous truth staring me in the face. Finally, I looked at Brenda. Let's do it. The next morning, I made my move. But as I walked into Richard's office, armed with the flash drive and a plan, I found him waiting, a knowing smile on his face. Good morning, Lydia, he said, leaning back in his chair. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. My blood ran cold. He'd been expecting me. And from the look in his eyes, the game was far from over.